Hello, BookTube. I have another tag for you in my effort to whittle down my tag backlog. An effort that is doomed if I'm going to keep adding tags to that backlog. But what can I do? People are trapped indoors. They're staying under quarantine. They're being very responsible citizens. And as a result, we're seeing an uptick in interesting tags. But this is a slightly older one that I've had on my books for a bit, for a week or so. That I meant to get to, and it's the book addiction tag, which I think fits all of us. I'm very happy to hear in emails from far and wide, from all and sundry. I leave my email in every address. Feel free to email me about anything. That is not a business email. That is, come straight to this little book room. Email me about anything you like. If you need a shoulder to cry on, or an ear to bend, or you've got dreams, or need advice, or anything like that, feel free. I've been hearing from a lot of people that the initial shock of a global pandemic, of quarantine and self-isolation, of social distancing and businesses closing, the initial shock of that stopped a lot of you from reading. And you were very alarmed by that, understandably so. You were very alarmed that this thing that had been your staff and guide for so long seemed to have gone away completely. But I've been very gratified to see in my emails that a lot of people have felt it come back as the shock of the new, the collective trauma of this pandemic has become that hackneyed phrase, the new normal. As that has happened, books have come surging back, and I feel certain that will continue to be true. I feel certain that in a lot of ways, not all, of course, it's perverse to say all, but that in a lot of ways, in some ways anyway, we will look back on having all this free time, having all this unstructured time, as one of the positives to come out of this whole thing. I think there'll be some positives. I feel like I'm the kind of person who looks at a gigantic traumatic event like this and just automatically thinks they can't all be negative after effects. There have to be some positive after effects. We shall see. We shall all see together. But in the meantime, we're all still book addicts. Whether reading is temporarily pleasing you or not, we're all still book addicts. And this tag addresses that just right down the line. And it also serves a secondary and I think important function that a lot of these new tags are doing. I've seen 2 or 3 of them that do this. I'm going to do them all because I like this secondary function, which is to introduce us all. It's a little bit of a trap that we can fall into here on BookTube. Though we have, as in any kind of human endeavor, you start to develop friendships. You start to develop routines and acquaintanceships, and they broaden. In our little corner of BookTube, they broaden far faster and more readily than anywhere else on YouTube. But nevertheless, they can also calcify. It gets to the point where you're thinking, well, where I'm making a video and I'm thinking, well, I don't need to explain this, that, or the other thing because Britta knows all the details. Well, she might, yes, but a whole bunch of people are new to all of our channels and don't. And that's a function of these informational tags, is to introduce us to those new people. Keep, within reason, not being quite narcissistic about it. The goal is to keep the general introductions happening on a distantly regular basis, so that somebody who's new to your channel doesn't have to dig back 100 videos, or in my case, 1,000 videos, in order to learn anything about you. So that's what this tag is. I mean, it's fun anyway in its own right. But but those of you who've been watching, well, those who've been watching 3,200 videos are probably in a different kind of lockdown, rubber rooms, straitjackets, that sort of thing, if you know what I mean. But those who've been watching a lot of videos, a lot of these answers will be familiar. But I thought I would do it anyway. The book addiction tag was created by Elaine Howlin, and I learned about her channel from this tag, and it's been a lot of fun catching up on her own videos. And question number 1 is, what is the longest amount of time you can go without picking up a book? I'm a rather extreme case, and I admit this. For me, it's the length of a dog walk, an hour, or maybe it wouldn't count that it's one specific book. If picking up a book means to pick up a new book and read it, well, I go chunks of time without doing that because I am a professional book reviewer. So I spend a lot of time every day writing. And when you're doing that, you've got one book open in front of you. In my case, mostly as a kind of spiritual guide because I'm pretty much just riffing. But You have one book in front of you, but you're not reading anything new. You've already studied this book. So, but outside of that, I am reading pretty much all the time. So it's a very short amount of time. Question number 2: how many books do you carry on your person or on your Kindle at any one time? And this is a little bit of a throwback question because I don't go anywhere anymore, and neither do most of the rest of you. But when I did go places, I had a shoulder bag, and I would always carry 2 books, one in my hand, a hardcover in my hand, and one paperback in a slot in the shoulder bag. And that was printed books. But there was also the Kindle app and the iBooks app on my phone, which have hundreds of books on them. Hundreds. I load those books all the time. Samples, finished books. I spend too much money that way, and too much time, too much attention that way. That has become a regular thing. My phone is a little bit on the wonky side. It's only Wi-Fi. My phone is only Wi-Fi. I don't have an actual data plan. And as a result, I have trained myself to make sure that before I go out, if I'm going out somewhere where I know I'm going to have downtime, I know that I'm going to be standing in line, or that I'm going to be waiting, or that I'm going to be on public transportation, all those things from a distant world now. That's what they feel like. When I used to be going out and I would know that was coming, where I wasn't just walking someplace, getting something and walking back, but that I knew that there would be downtime, I made sure before I left to refresh the downloads on a bunch of things that I wanted. Nothing more frustrating than to be on a train platform and realize that one of the books on your Kindle is not downloaded, that it went into storage because you hadn't touched it in a while, and you can't download it because the train platform is not wired. That's very frustrating. So I made sure to do that ahead of time. So when I was out and about, I had 30 books to choose from. And that was a great benefit. That's one of the great benefits of ebooks. My Kindle app is refreshed. It's linked across 3 different devices. My actual Kindle, my iPad, and my phone. Which means that if I download a book, well, I've got it everywhere. And that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Yes, it's true that I don't technically, in most cases, own that book. But in a great number of cases, I do. There's Project Gutenberg, there's archives.org, there's a whole bunch of places where you can download just a free copy of a book. And that Project Gutenberg is the one I know best. And if you're not familiar with it, you might think, well, okay, I just got a Kobo, or I just got a new device of some kind or other. I just downloaded a free ebook app, and I've noticed that across these apps, they're all the same. The books you're getting are all the same. It's just, oh, what have we got here? Oh, who are all those people, Baby Bean? Who are they all? They love seeing your face. So do I, but I see your face all the time. It's the first thing I see in the morning. It is. It's the first thing I see in the morning. Every morning. Oh. In the morning it looks quite terrible. Her mustaches are all flying everywhere. Her eyebrows are all flying everywhere. I have to smooth those down and straighten things out in one of our early morning sessions, which she doesn't like. She's a bit of a tomboy. She doesn't like being fussed over. But I fuss over you anyway. I do. Because you're so pretty. Oh, all right, down you go. Anywho, what was I saying? It was about ebooks or something or other. Let's just move on. Question number 3. Do you keep every book you buy or receive, or are you happy to pass them along? I'm happy to pass things along. I love doing it. That's one of the things we talk all the time in the aforementioned emails and here on BookTube about the little things that we miss, that we didn't think we'd miss quite so much because they have stopped as a result of quarantine. And one of the things that I miss, oh my, you could probably see it coming a mile away, is mailing books out to people, mailing books out to you. I miss doing that very much. That used to be a regular part of my week several times. I knew the post office clerks. They're still there. They're still working. But there's no way that I'm going to go to an enclosed room with a bunch of people who are immunocompromised and stand in line with them in order to mail out packages. That's not going to happen until things are very different from the way they are now, at least in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is still a national hotspot for this virus. So our numbers, I believe, have shown a slight tendency to level out. They aren't quite dropping the way New York's are, but But that's all a bit of an illusion anyway, because this country has done 1, 2, maybe 5% testing. So we don't know how many people are sick. We don't know how many people are infected. And we don't know, therefore, how imperiled our public services are. Knowledge is power, and we don't have that knowledge. So I don't know when I will go back to bookstores on a regular basis. But anyway, I loved doing that. That was my favorite thing. So definitely pass along. The one thing I never did was give loan books to people. I don't loan books to anyone at all. I don't know why anyone does. I don't know anyone who has any good stories about loaning books. They're all stories about loaning books are cautionary tales. They all turn out bad. Something goes wrong. Either the person doesn't return the book, and then you say, if you're not going to read that, I'd like to have it back. And the friend feels extra guilty and therefore extra combative and says, no, I am going to read it. And then you're never going to get it back because they're not going to read it. But now it's a point of pride that they're not going to give it back to you. Or they'll turn it back to you and it'll have writing in it, or it'll be damaged, or it'll be really, really worn. A very different book than the one you got. And you might, if you summon the courage, say, boy, you really beat this thing up. If I'd loaned you an album and you'd returned to me with scratches all over it, you wouldn't make nothing of it. And if you work up your courage to do that, then the friend is going to say something along the lines of, "Oh, I'll buy you a new one." And then it's just, then what do you do? They're not going to do it. So you're in the horrible position of saying, any chance of getting that new copy of the book you destroyed? No, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. I don't do it. I don't lend books at all. If somebody comes over here in the old days when people did, if they saw a book that they wanted, I would just give it to them. If I didn't want to give it to them, I would tell them I'm using it. It's part of my active collection. That's one of the reasons eons ago that I started separating the books wherever I go. I always have a little book room like this. The smallest room in any place. I don't need much room at all. This room is actually twice as big as I need it to be. A little room that I line with the books that I love, that I absolutely love. In other words, the books I will not lend out under any circumstances. And then there's other rooms that have other books in them that I do very much love, but I'm willing to lend them out. Once upon a time I was, until I realized that that's a losing game, and now it's easy. Now there's an actual line of excuse that divides both those places. In here, no, absolutely not. These are my books. I don't lend these out to anybody. And out there, well, I might need it for work. That's a research library. So I'm afraid I can't. So if I didn't want to get rid of it. If I did, and that was mostly the case, good Lord, I can't count the number of times people come over here for wine and calzones and talk books into the wee small hours. And then as they're leaving, I'm just encouraging them to fill their arms with books. Just take as much as you want. Anything that interests you at all. Just absolutely take it. But not lending. I don't ever expect those books back. I don't want them back. Let's see here. Question number 4. How long would you spend in a bookshop on a standard visit? I had to think about this for a bit. I realized it was about 45 minutes maximum for a normal bookshop. If I can't figure out what I want, that mental winnowing process that you do in your mind, here's how much money I'm willing to spend, here's what I think I want, here's what I know I want, here's a speculative gamble, that sort of thing. If you can't fiddle with all of that and figure it out in 45 minutes, then you're not gonna. Or the decisions will be bad ones anyway. The only exception to that I can think of is the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut. Probably closed at the moment, as all these places are, and as they should be. But the Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut is a big complex of buildings, 5 buildings full of used books, and a koi pond, and a petting zoo, and an innumerable number of cats, and a dog, and a great staff. And simply covering the ground of the Book Barn, simply seeing everything that's there, takes longer than an hour and a half. It is a bookworm's paradise. The Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut on a high summer day is someday in a dream scenario, someday I would go there with all of you. And that's what we would do. On a high summer day, we would go there. And that would be so great. It would be so great. I might even be able to bring Frieda. She would certainly love all the humans that were there. The problem would be that she tends to get awful huffy and bossy around other dogs and around cats as well. So, but that's not much of a problem because she's 10 pounds. I can carry her in the crook of my elbow for the whole of a day without getting in the least bit tired. So, but one way or another, oh, that would be so nice. But the Book Barn is the only exception. Question number 5, how much time per day do you actually spend reading? About an average of 10 hours. And that is not a product of the quarantine for me, for those of you who are new to this channel. That's all I do. That's my job. So all I do is read and write about what I read and play with my little dog. So about an average of 10 hours out of every 24. So at midnight every night, I turn into a pumpkin. I unplug all electronics. I turn them off. I don't just shut them down. I turn them off. I turn off the phone. I turn off the iPad. I turn off the computer, so that I might as well be in 1900. So there are no electronics anymore in this room, and I just read. Now I'm aided in that by the fact that I need much less sleep than you do, but even so, when that night is over, I will stretch and crack my back and take a few deep breaths and do some deep knee bends and go outside with the bean, walk around, see what the day is like. The last 50 months, consecutive 50 months, that has been a painful experience because it's been dark and freezing cold and sleeting rain for the last 50 months here in Boston, consecutively every day without any exceptions. I don't know if that's ever going to end. The forecast is showing 6 straight days of rain coming up. But sometimes we enjoy that morning walk, that with the clean, fresh air and whatnot. And then very often, after I do that, it's straight back to reading for a couple of hours, or more than a couple of hours. Sometimes I top that 8-9 hours at night with another block of 6 hours. So an average of 10 hours a day is what I read. Question number 6 is, where does the task of picking up a book appear on your daily to-do list? If by picking up a book you mean buying, I hardly do it at all, of course. I wish that I did, but I don't. I really, really miss the random serendipity of just going to a bookstore and hunting to see what pops out at you. I really miss that. I really do. But in terms of picking up a book, in other words, it's been too long since one was in your hand. Well, as you can tell from these answers, it's a near constant thing. I don't read when I'm cooking, and other than that, I read in the bathroom. I read on the couch. I read on the bed. I read everywhere. So I read in the easy chair. I've lost count of. I have a big, very old, very battered easy chair from Ireland, and it has been repaired and reinforced many times. I don't think it's long for this world. Every time I'm out and about with a bean on a garbage day, when people brought their garbage out to the sidewalk, every time I see a perfectly good easy chair just sitting there on the sidewalk, I kind of think maybe you should take it, because your chair isn't going to last forever. It isn't going to outlast you. But I have that easy chair, and I like to do a lot of like if I have a meal, I will have, there's a side table, I have a meal in that easy chair. And I always tell myself, well, okay, when you do this, when you sit down to this meal at this easy chair, what you're going to do, since you're online the rest of the time, is pull out these periodicals that are piling up on the side table and read one of those. Or pull out your iPad and do a little looking around online, a lecture series, or maybe there are YouTube videos that you haven't seen yet. And many, many times, I won't say invariably, but many, many times when I do that and when I tell myself that, I end up reading a book instead. Sometimes while the food goes cold. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I have it really bad. Question number 7 is, how many books do you reckon you own in total, including ebooks? I would say for me, including ebooks, the number is probably around 4,000, with 3,000 being the printed books that are here in the place, and that used to change quite a bit. My 3,000 used to be like the layers of soil. So there was a big, thick, deep layer that hardly changes at all. Then an intermediary layer that has a bit of change, but a lot of stuff that stays the same. And then a topsoil layer that changed all the time. And because I can't get rid of books now, because there's no one around, the charity shops or the Brattle Bookshop or anywhere else, that has stopped being true. So now they just pile up. But the basic printed book collection is probably around 3,000, and then another 1,000 ebooks of one kind or another, out of public domain classics, new books, that sort of thing. Let's see here. Question number 8. Approximately how often do you bring up books in conversation? Well, in conversation now that I'm in quarantine, 99% of my conversations are with Frieda, who who isn't human and doesn't know how to read, so we don't talk about books at all. But even when we weren't in quarantine, it's still a bit of an unfair question for me because it's my job, and most of the people that I talk with are people who are somehow connected with that same job. They're authors, they're publishers, they're publicists, they're other reviewers, they're writers. So that the conversation is still bookish anyway. So it would still be a high amount. It wouldn't be quite as much as it is now, but even under what I'm still stubbornly calling normal circumstances, I would still talk about books an enormous amount. it's all that I really talk about. Let's see here. Question number 9. What is the biggest book in terms of page count that you have finished? This came up just the other day, and I'm not sure that it would be probably a toss-up between N.T. Wright, one of his big books, Paul and the Faithfulness of God, or something like that. That's absolutely enormous, just 1,700 pages. Or Reclaiming History by Vincent Bugliosi, which is also 1,500 plus pages long, but has a disc of very textual notes and addendum that go with the book that add another 1,500 pages. So I don't really know. In terms of just actual turning the physical page count, it might go to Tom Wright. But I think, as I mentioned, I think in an ideal printing situation, the notes in Reclaiming History would be at the bottom of every page and sometimes take up 3/4 of the page, because a lot of them are written disquisitions on different subjects. They are not just page numbers. And if that printing situation were ever possible, then that would be the biggest one by far. Question number 10 is there a book you had to get your hands on at all odds? And I try not to experience this kind of urgency because it can blur your mind when you're reviewing. But I did see a book written up in Esquire, I think it was Esquire. It was Bubblegum by Adam Levin, a big work of fiction that I don't have. I don't have an advanced copy of it. I don't have an e-copy of it. I've never had a publicist contact me about it, and that creates FOMO. I'm kind of curious to know about it now. I am still putting out feelers to get it, but if worse comes to worse, I will just download a copy once it's commercially available. It might be commercially available right now, for all I know, because I tend to sleep on these things. If I don't get it myself from a publicist, then I tend to sleep on it. Then question number 11 is a book you struggled to finish but refused to DNF, to do not finish. For me, that is an absolutely remarkable thing by Hank Green. After page, I would say 20, maybe 15 or 20, it was a root canal with no anesthesia. It was an awful experience. It's just, I had been curious before this book appeared. I had been curious if Hank Green learned anything from reading his brother's books. His brother's books have been mega New York Times best-selling books. He has an army of YouTube tween nerd fighteria fans that will do anything. They'll buy anything. They'll make a mega bestseller out of anything that he writes. And John Green's books are awful. They are just excruciatingly awful, to the point where many times in his books, at many points in each book, I have stopped and just thought, this has got to be an intentional practical joke. There's no way for this to be this bad, even accidentally. This has to be intentional. This has to be irony of some kind or another. Not necessarily at the expense of his tween fans, but definitely intentional on his own part. No one could write a book this bad otherwise. And I have come grudgingly to believe that I'm wrong about that you can very much do that. If you're plugged into the mother of all echo chambers that thinks you're a god on earth, then you could write a book like this, and no one would ever be able to tell you otherwise. And for a while I wondered, okay, there was rumor that Hank Green is going to write a book. I wonder what he will learn from the example of his brother's books. I wonder if he's in the same bubble. And, oh my God, an absolutely remarkable thing. Certainly gave me my answers. They're not the answers I wish. I wished that I had liked it, but it is excruciatingly awful. Excruciatingly. Characters, plot, dialogue, the gigantic donkey cart laden level of extremely dateable idioms and slang. And when you strip all that stuff away, all that crap away, and you get to the world building, which you're thinking maybe might save this thing, no, it's the most crappy derivative. No. no. So 15 or 20 pages into an absolutely remarkable thing, I realized that I was reading a knockoff John Green novel. A John Green novel that was, if anything, even worse than John Green's actual novels, except that Hank Green's novel, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, doesn't have the reek of entitlement that is all around John Green's books, especially his last two books. It doesn't have that, but it will. It absolutely will. Hank Green is hard at work, if you want to call it that, on a sequel. And that will have that sense of entitlement because An Absolutely Remarkable Thing debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and spent 30 years there. So, and did so solely because of Nerdfighteria, solely because of a whole bunch of people out there, 1.5 million people out there, never forgetting to be awesome. So I had to struggle to finish it, but I did. Every once in a while, not ever with a book this bad, but every once in a while a book has been bad and I have struggled to get to the end of it and it's turned a corner at some point. Long before I got to the end of An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, I knew it wasn't going to turn any corners, and it didn't. Except the one thing that might change in this book is that it might get worse. And around page 100, I was thinking, okay, now that I've slogged through 100 pages of breathless tween Twitter texting, that's exactly what the whole thing reads like. Now that I've struggled through 100 pages of this, I'm imagining the surprise ending. I'm imagining the dumbest possible gimmick to finish this book. But surely it won't be that. Surely Hank Green has read dumb books like that and railed against them so that he won't do that, and he does. So the one turn that it had was for the negative. Then question number 12 is, what are your 3 main bookish goals for the year? I'm afraid that my bookish goals don't really change from year to year, and that's why this would be a little derivative to the people who've watched my channel many times, but maybe not to a newcomer. I've basically the 3 that I wrote down here. Number 1 is to exceed the total number of books that I read in 2019, and in March of 2020 I was well on track to do that. I don't think I'm going to do it now, solely because of an act of God, solely because of totally unforeseen and absolutely historical circumstance. I don't know that that's going to happen. I'll try my hardest. What I'd like to do is exceed the number of books that I read in 2020. We shall see if it happens. Then goal number 2 is to review more books, just in general, across all the venues that I have. And again, I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think I'm going to exceed 2019 solely due to circumstances outside of my own control. It's not me slacking off. And goal number 3 is to find new venues. And likewise, nobody's at their newspapers. Nobody's there. Nobody's at. It's not right now anyway. Right now, at the end of April, I had to pause for a minute because it's freezing cold and dark as twilight, and there are 6 days of sleet in the forecast. It is effectively midwinter, and it has been forever. But nevertheless, on the calendar, we are heading into May. We're heading into May. Some of the trees and shrubs around Hyde Cottage here have started to try to bloom, despite the fact that there's sleet and that it's freezing cold and that there's no sunlight. We're going into April right now. I don't see anybody taking new pitches, but I guess they have to, right? Places still have to run content. But those have been my goals all along. Every time goals come up in a tag or on BookTube of any kind, I always say I want to read more books than I did the year before. I want to exceed my personal total. I want to review more books, and I want to gain more venues, including the 3 I's: small town Iowa, small town India, and small town Ireland. None of those 3 have happened, but I've had others. I've had other changes in the landscape here and there, and maybe I should knock off the defeatism and get back to work doing that in May. We shall see. But anyway, that is the book addiction tag, full of really good general information about who you are as a reader. And all it's have to do is tag people. I have a bunch of people here, but I don't know if I'm tagging some people too much or not enough. So if you have a book addiction, and of course you do, and if you have a BookTube channel, you should do this tag. And maybe keep in mind that if you've seen some of these questions before, it's important for all of us to remember, especially in our little group, our little 150 channel group, it's important for us to remember that new people are finding us all the time, and they might very much appreciate a new profile here and there. Well, who do I have here? Well, Brian at Bookish, dagnabbit. Pints and Paperbacks, again, I've tagged him a few times. I don't think he's making videos anymore. Sean D. Standfast, always up for a tag. And again, Sean D. Standfast, he's a relatively new channel, makes lots of videos, has a vast bookish knowledge, but it's not always the thing that you think to do, to sit down and just give a sort of a rap sheet of who you are, the basic outlines of who you are to new viewers. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to do that. Of course, Mark Richardson at Richards Reads, if you want to do this, Jason at Byways and Bookland. I know, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I know a lot of these answers already for some people, but I'd love to hear them all in one tag. Todd's Bursting Bookcase, the OGBG, why not? Peg at the History Shelf. You're a couple of tags behind now for the ones I'm doing. Maybe you don't feel like doing tags. It's another thing that I worry about just a little, is that people might not feel like doing tags. If you don't, of course, feel free to ignore. And of course, Britta. But Britta has now been buried in like 40 tags by me, so I don't imagine I'm going to see any of them. But I loved it. I had great fun. I'll leave a link down below to the original tag, so you can go and see it for yourself. And I would love to hear your answers, whether I tagged you or not. So I'm gonna wrap this up. Once again, a tag has gone over 30 minutes. I'm going to try and do one tomorrow in 15 minutes. We shall see. But in the meantime, I'll be back. We have lots more to talk about. Thank you, BookTube.